Hello everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. There's a moment in every relationship where you realize you've been fooling yourself. For me, that moment came at a house party on a Saturday night in October, when the woman I'd planned to marry turned my deepest pain into a punchline for strangers to laugh at. But to understand why that moment shattered everything, you need to know how we got there. Nicole and I had been together for 3 years when this happened. I was an accountant at a mid-sized firm, and she worked as a model in a talent agency alongside other side projects she did. We had met through my friend, who felt I should be in a serious relationship. After getting close to Nicole, we sort of connected right from the first day. The relationship had progressed naturally with dates and spending weekends together. Eventually, she moved into my apartment. I never thought anything could go wrong with how we complemented each other. By most measures, we were the picture of stability. I already had plans to take things to the next step. I'd even bought an engagement ring that was sitting in my sock drawer at the time things ended. Looking back now, I realize I was so focused on building our future that I ignored the signs of who Nicole really was. But at the time, I felt secure enough around Nicole to let my guard down in a way I never had before. That security led me to share something with her I'd kept locked away for most of my adult life. I told her about something that happened when I was 12. My parents, who had been married for 15 years, ended things. My mother decided she was done with family life. I didn't exactly see them have any big fight, no affair that I knew about, no obvious breaking point. She just told my father one Tuesday morning that she wanted a divorce, and by Friday, she'd moved out of our house, and I had no idea where she lived going forward. The divorce between my parents took about 8 months to finalize, but my mother checked out of my life much faster than that. At first, there were weekend visits and awkward dinners at chain restaurants where she'd ask about school, while we both pretended everything was normal. But those visits became less frequent, then stopped altogether. My father tried to explain it in ways that wouldn't destroy my 12-year-old understanding of the world. But kids aren't stupid, and I could see the truth he was trying to hide. She abandoned me. My father tried to be there for me in every way he could. My mother's abandonment shaped everything about how I approached relationships as an adult. I dated carefully, never letting anyone get too close too quickly. I was terrified of giving someone I love a reason to leave. By the time my friend introduced me to Nicole, I'd been through enough therapy to understand my patterns, but understanding them and overcoming them were different things. I still had moments of panic when she didn't text back quickly. Still caught myself analyzing every conversation for signs that she was pulling away. But Nicole seemed different. She was patient with my occasional neediness and consistent in ways that slowly helped me relax. So when I opened up to her after 2.5 years together, I felt I could feel safe with her. She asked thoughtful questions about how it had affected me, about my relationship with my father now, about whether I'd ever reconnected with my mother. She didn't try to fix anything or offer empty reassurances. She just listened, and at the end, she said she felt honored that I'd shared something so personal with her. That night changed something fundamental in our relationship. I felt lighter, like I'd been carrying a weight I hadn't realized was there. The fear that had lived in the back of my mind for most of our relationship, that she'd eventually get up one day and leave, finally started to fade. I slept better that night than I had in months. For months, everything felt perfect, but gradually, I would catch her throw in a joke about me having mummy issues. I didn't think much of it, since it came from a place of love. I told myself that there was no need to be too sensitive. Couples joked about each other's quirks all the time. If anything, maybe it was healthy that she felt comfortable enough to tease me about it. As time went on, it became a recurring theme. There was a day she left the home for her sister's house, which was an hour away. I called to check if she'd made it safely. She laughed and asked if she hopes I'm not being paranoid because of my mummy issues. Well, I also swept that under the carpet. In another situation, when I suggested we spend a quiet weekend at home instead of going to some social event, she joked that I was being clingy because of my abandonment problems. Each time, she said it with affection, like it was an endearing quirk rather than a source of real pain. I started feeling exposed in a way I hadn't expected. The thing I'd shared in confidence, the most vulnerable part of my history, had become a running joke. But every time I considered saying something, Nicole's tone was so light, so clearly meant to be playful, that I worried I was overreacting. While these statements weren't malicious or came from a place of bitterness, they were constant reminders that my deepest insecurity was now fair game for casual observation. I found myself second-guessing normal behaviors, wondering if asking her to text when she got home safely was reasonable or if it was just my mummy issues acting up. The breaking point came during an argument. We'd been discussing money, specifically Nicole's habit of buying expensive clothes and skincare products, while contributing less than half to our shared expenses. I tried to bring it up gently, suggesting we create a budget together so we could save for our future. Nicole got defensive, accusing me of trying to control her spending. The conversation escalated, and I explained that I wasn't trying to control anything, just wanted us to be responsible about our financial goals. That's when she crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. She asked me if I was being controlling because of my past. She framed it in such a way that one would swear that she was trying to diagnose me as a therapist. She added that I couldn't see the difference between partnership and possession because I was so damaged by my mother walking out. The room went quiet. I looked at Nicole and saw someone who had taken the most painful experience of my life and turned it into ammunition for a petty argument about credit card bills. I told her very calmly and very clearly that she was never to bring my mother or my childhood into our arguments again. I explained that there was a difference between supportive teasing between partners and using someone's trauma against them. I said if she did it again, we would have a serious problem. Nicole immediately backtracked, claiming she was just being concerned, that she didn't mean it the way it sounded. She said I was being too sensitive. She apologized, but it felt hollow, like she was sorry she'd upset me but didn't understand why what she'd done was wrong. We didn't talk much for the rest of that evening. The next day, Nicole brought me coffee in bed and acted like everything was normal. Over the following weeks, she was careful not to make any comments about my past, and I started to hope that maybe she'd finally understood the boundary I'd set. But I was wrong. The situation that ended our relationship happened at a friend's housewarming party that was supposed to be a relaxing weekend with friends. Our friend had recently bought a house in the suburbs and was eager to show it off. At the event, Nicole decided to drink. There was nothing unusual about that. She enjoyed wine at social events, and I never minded being the designated driver. By 9 o'clock, though, she'd had 4 glasses of red wine, and I could see the telltale signs. Her laugh getting a little too loud, her gestures more animated than usual. I was catching up with another friend who was at the event when Nicole stumbled slightly while walking past us. She caught herself on the kitchen counter and laughed it off, but I noticed the people around glance over with concern. 20 minutes later, I found Nicole by the bar, reaching for another bottle of wine. The conversation around us was flowing, the usual party chatter. I approached quietly, not wanting to make a scene. I placed my hand gently on her arm and spoke close to her ear so only she could hear me. I suggested maybe she should slow down a bit, perhaps have some water or food. We'd only eaten a light lunch, and I was genuinely worried about how much she'd consumed. That's when everything changed. Nicole turned toward me, looked directly at me, her voice carrying clearly across the now quiet room, and announced to everyone present that a man with mummy issues had no right to tell her what to do. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel every pair of eyes in the room focusing on us. Conversations stopped mid-sentence across the room. In that moment, I felt completely exposed. The most private, painful part of my life, the thing I'd trusted Nicole with in a moment of complete vulnerability, had just become entertainment for her coworkers. The abandonment I'd experienced as a 12-year-old boy, the years of therapy, the careful work I'd done to trust someone enough to share that pain, all of it was now gossip material. I didn't say anything. Some people were trying to look away politely, but others were staring with the kind of curiosity people have when they witness someone else's humiliation. Nicole seemed to realize something was wrong, but in her intoxicated state, she appeared confused by the reaction she was getting. Maybe she made that statement to be funny or sound sarcastic, but I can't tell. She looked around the room, then back at me, as if she couldn't understand why everyone had gone quiet. I turned and walked toward the front door. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I didn't explain to anyone what was happening. I just left. Behind me, I could hear Nicole calling my name, her voice slightly slurred and increasingly panicked. I stopped walking. The drive home was silent except for the sound of my phone buzzing repeatedly in my pocket. I didn't need to check it to know it was Nicole, but I had no intention of answering. By the time I reached my apartment, something had crystallized in my mind with perfect clarity. This relationship was over. That night, Nicole called me 16 times before showing up at the house. When I didn't open the door for her, she continued with the calls until nearly 2 in the morning. She left voicemails that progressed from confused to apologetic to desperate. In the early messages, she seemed genuinely bewildered by my reaction, asking what she'd done wrong and why I'd left without her. By the latter ones, she was crying, begging me to open the door, promising to explain and make things right. I listened to exactly none of them that night. Instead, I sat in my living room and thought about the past year and a half with complete clarity for the first time. I thought about all the little comments, all the times she dismissed my feelings as overreactions, all the moments when my vulnerability had become her entertainment. I realized that the woman I'd been planning to marry had been showing me exactly who she was for months, and I'd been too hopeful to see it. I had no idea when she decided to leave that night. The next day was Sunday, and Nicole's calls started again around 9 in the morning. This time, I did listen to her voicemails, and they were different from the night before. She'd sobered up and clearly remembered what had happened. She was apologizing, explaining that she'd had too much to drink, that she didn't mean what she'd said, that she loved me and wanted to work things out. But the content of her apologies told me everything I needed to know. She was sorry for embarrassing me, sorry for drinking too much, and sorry for saying something hurtful in public. She wasn't sorry for violating my trust or weaponizing my trauma. She didn't seem to understand that the problem wasn't only the alcohol or the audience. It was that she'd shown a room full of strangers the most sensitive part of my emotional landscape, like it was a party trick. Around noon, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment again, followed by a soft knock on the door. I knew it was Nicole before I opened it. She was holding 2 cups of coffee from our usual place, looking exhausted and worried. I let her in, and we sat across from each other at my kitchen table. She started talking immediately, explaining about the party, about how much she'd had to drink, about how she'd never meant to hurt me. She promised it would never happen again, that she'd learned her lesson, that we could get past this if I'd just give her another chance. I listened to everything she had to say. When she finished, I told her the relationship was over and I would need her to move out as soon as possible. Nicole's reaction was immediate and intense. She argued that everyone makes mistakes, that couples work through problems together, and that throwing away 3 years over one drunken comment was extreme. She reminded me of all the good times we'd had, all the plans we'd made, all the ways we'd supported each other through difficult periods. I explained that this wasn't about one comment. It was about a pattern of behavior that had been building for months, a fundamental disrespect for boundaries I'd clearly set, and a betrayal of trust that couldn't be repaired. I told her that when someone shares their deepest trauma with you, using it as a weapon or entertainment isn't a mistake. It's a choice. Nicole cried, arguing that she'd never meant it maliciously, that the comments had always been meant affectionately, that I was reading too much into innocent teasing between partners. She said she'd been stupid and thoughtless, but not intentionally cruel. I believed that she hadn't set out to be malicious. But intention doesn't erase impact, and the impact of her choices had been to make me feel less in my own relationship. The person who was supposed to be my greatest source of security had become someone I needed to protect myself from. The conversation lasted about 2 hours. Nicole tried every argument she could think of, that I was overreacting, that my abandonment issues were making me see threats where none existed, that walking away from love over one mistake was exactly the kind of self-sabotage my therapist would warn me about. That last argument almost worked. For a moment, I wondered if she was right, if my fear of abandonment was causing me to abandon, first as some kind of psychological self-defense. But then I remembered the pain of the previous day, and I knew the difference between self-sabotage and self-protection. When Nicole finally left my apartment that afternoon with some of her things, we both knew it was permanent. I told her that she doesn't have to return, as I would box the rest of her things and send them down to any address she wants. The engagement ring stayed in my sock drawer for another month before I returned it to the jeweler. The weeks that followed were harder than I'd expected. 3 years of shared routines don't disappear overnight, and I found myself reaching for my phone to text her about random things on some days. I missed having someone to talk to about work problems and weekend plans. I missed the comfort of the familiar companionship I got from her. But I didn't miss walking on eggshells around my own trauma. I didn't miss wondering if my normal human needs for reassurance would become fodder for jokes. I didn't miss feeling like I had to defend my right to privacy about the most painful experiences of my life. In the months that followed, I did a lot of thinking about trust and vulnerability. I realized that sharing your deepest wounds with someone isn't just about being open. It's about choosing someone worthy of that openness. Nicole had shown me repeatedly that she wasn't worthy of it, but I'd been so focused on building the relationship I wanted that I'd ignored the relationship I actually had. I'm more careful now about who I trust with vulnerable parts of myself. I still believe in the importance of emotional intimacy, but I've learned the difference between healthy vulnerability and reckless exposure. When someone shows you they can't handle your trust responsibly, believing them the first time saves you from bigger betrayals later. Nicole texted me twice in the months after we broke up, once to say she missed me and asked if we could talk, then another to wish me a happy birthday. I didn't respond to either message, not out of anger, but because there was nothing left to say. She'd shown me exactly who she was, and I'd finally learned to believe her. Looking back now, I'm grateful for that humiliating moment at that party. It was painful, but it was also clarifying. It showed me that the woman I'd been planning to marry was someone who would use my deepest insecurities against me when it suited her purposes. Better to learn that before the wedding than after. I kept the therapy going for several more months, working through the complicated feelings of grief and relief that followed the breakup. I learned to sit with the discomfort of being alone without panic, to distinguish between loneliness and abandonment, to trust my own judgment about people's character. In a situation when I eventually started dating again, I will be different. I want to be still kind, still attentive, still invested in building meaningful connections. But I also want to be more discerning about who earned access to my vulnerability. I want to learn to recognize the difference between someone who supports your healing and someone who exploits your wounds. The right person, when you finally find them, doesn't turn your trauma into entertainment. They don't weaponize your trust when they're angry or drunk or trying to win an argument. They understand that being trusted with someone's deepest pain is a privilege, not material for casual jokes. I'm glad I walked out of that party. I'm glad I didn't answer those phone calls. I'm glad I chose protecting myself over protecting a relationship that was slowly eroding my sense of safety and self-worth. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away from someone who refuses to treat you with basic human dignity. Trust, once broken in certain ways, can't be repaired. And that's okay. Some betrayals teach us exactly who people really are, and the lesson is worth more than the relationship ever was.